Welcome to China Insider, a podcast from the Hudson Institute's China Center. I am Miles Yu, Senior Fellow and Director of the China Center. Join me each week for our analysis of the major events concerning China, China threat, and their implications to the U.S. and beyond.
We have three topics this week. First, we review the seminal milestone for China's Communist Party as they cross the 100 million member threshold and what the annual membership growth rates forecast about the future health of the party. Second, we discuss Foreign Minister Wang Yi's comments in Brussels concerning the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine and what the U.S. has done since and may do moving forward in response. Lastly, we test a myth about China's consumer consumption and look to unpack the reality behind Chinese consumer spending and the extent of low wages are to blame for the stagnating consumption. Miles, great to be with you again this week.
Nice to be with you again, Colin.
So first up this week, the Chinese Communist Party hit the 100 million member milestone last week as the total number of party cadres reached 100.27 million at the end of 2024, marking an increase of 1.1% from the previous year, according to the CCP's organization department. The announcement came just ahead of the party's 104th anniversary last week. So Miles, what does this milestone mean for the CCP, and what exactly does it mean to be a party member in China?
Well, let me just give you an anecdote before I answer this question directly. You know, in the early 1990s, Boris Yeltsin, the president of Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, was asked by a reporter, so Mr. President Yeltsin, how do you really assess the fact that the peak of the Soviet Union, the Soviet Communist Party's membership reached near 20 million people? Yeltsin said, well, I need to correct one mistake in your question. That is, when the Soviet Union party membership reached 20 million strong, it does not necessarily mean it's at its peak. On the opposite, it is the weakest point in its existence. Why is this the case? Because most of people join the party not because of conviction, but because being a party member can enjoy a whole bunch of privileges that other people would not get. So this is basically a very similar situation. But I think in the case of China, it's much, much more serious to be in a party. You know, because the Chinese Communist Party is what Lenin said, the vanguard of the proletariat. In other words, the party enjoys supremacy in all aspects of life. You know, if you committed a crime, and if you are sentenced to a life term in prison, that is not nearly as serious as if you were expelled from the Communist Party, if you're a party member, because losing party membership means you're dead politically, and most likely you'll end up in jail anyway. So the number one crime in China is not murder or anything, it's anti-party, 反党. So that's why most serious charges against the party member is that you're anti-party. So that's basically a very serious theoretical foundation for all the purges because you're labeled as an anti-party member. So having said that, however, it does not necessarily mean that, you know, really in this case, most of the people who joined the Communist Party were not communists rather than opportunists. The question is, the Chinese Communist Party is the Marxist-Leninist party entity that really is excelling at change your perspective, worldview. Even if you join the party for material purposes, the party has this amazing capability to indoctrinate you, to send you to party school, 党校, to be indoctrinated and to become a true believer in communism. So in this case, Mr. Yeltsin underestimated the degree to which the party can change you and indoctrinate you to become a true believer after you join the party. So that is the reason why there are a lot of people in China wants to join the party because they want a golden ticket to good life and to be protected. by the most important the disciplinary code in China is not a criminal code. It's a party disciplinary code. That's why in China, the Communist Party's discipline inspection group is the most powerful. So what I'm trying to say here is that people join the party and you have 100 million strong. That doesn't necessarily mean the party is strong. On the other hand, it could also mean the party can embrace and absorb all the people who have potential to be successful in life into the party orbit and change them into a true believer in communism and to serve the party and to prolong the monopoly of the Chinese Communist Party. So it's a pretty serious business.
According to several reports, the current acceptance rate of new cadres into the CCP sits at around 10% following stricter admission criteria from the Central Organization Department and leading to more rejections and longer probationary periods. Some brief statistics from the previous year, just over half of the applicants came from the productive or labor sectors or held a college degree, and 83% were aged 35 or younger, which seems to track with China's current youth unemployment crisis and pursuing all available opportunities to them. So, Miles, what can we make of these specific members? Are they true believers, like you mentioned, or are they in it more for the career opportunity at this point?
I think it's a combination of both. In the end, they all would become true believers because to become otherwise lose the purpose of the party, it's the only existence. Let me put it this way. Traditionally, the Chinese Communist Party, even though it's called the vanguard of the proletariat, mostly is a party of the elites. So you have those educated intellectuals. Many of them were deluded and they were idealists. They were hopeless, idealists. They joined the party for some kind of a visionary future of the world. And then you have this people who are who belong to the elite sector of the country, the military, the police, the intelligence establishment. So you join that. Now, gradually, you have this problem. The sort of growing antagonism between the party elites and the masses, the people, the working people. So from the time of Jiang Zemin, about that time, he said, you know what, if we don't expand the party membership among the working group, and we're going to have a problem of regime survival. So it was from Jiang Zemin's time, he really emphasized to recruit members of the party from the working class. So that's why he put out something called the Three Represents. That's the reason why. It's not because they care about these people who belong to the working class. It's because they think if we don't do that, the party will lose its grip on the people. So they use these methods to cultivate proxies, representatives, party cadres in the lower and middle sector of the country. And actually, it worked pretty well because since then, in every business enterprise, foreign and domestic enterprise, by the way, you must have a party sale. So Communist Party is now in Walmart in China, in Apple, for example, in China. So this is pretty serious business. I have no doubt there's a Communist Party sales in Tesla factory in Shanghai because the party controls a lot of sort of a daily routine. And I think, in the production period area, in economic production area, the party has a very firm group on the loyalty of the parties. So that's one of the things that we have to take into account, that if you set up a factory in China, it's not just a cheap labor. You are operating in an entirely different political model where the Communist Party's interest is always supreme. So that's the inherent danger of doing business in China, even setting factories in China. So I think right now you are seeing a more and more people from the sort of the non-elite sector. The interesting thing is pretty much like the Soviet Union, right? Once you are absorbed into the party apparatus, and you yourself become the new elite, and you become the sort of master of the people you're supposed to represent. And this is basically the irony of history and the inner logic of the Communist Party. So it's gradually you have the new class. Now, the difference here is that there's also another utility of Chinese Communist Party's way, their efforts to expand the party membership. That is to prevent these guys from going abroad, from fleeing China. You know, right now, a lot of people who are capable want to get out of China. If you are a member of the party has a much stronger control over you. Your passport control and your loyalty control and your party membership, for example, it will be at risk if you really try to get out of China. And that's one of the problems I think China is trying to combat. That is, it's a rank and file. Once they join the party, they got all kinds of illicit income, and they want to get it out of China. And then if you join the party, and then you have this kind of so-called Yeltsin phenomenon of a lot of people trying to enjoy the party membership. So I would say membership has its privilege, as the cliche goes.
Despite the 100 million milestone marker, the CCP annual member growth rate has actually declined each year since 2021, falling from then 3.7% down all the way to 1.4 to 1.2, and now this year to 1.1. We've discussed Xi Jinping's corruption campaign several times, including the recent PLA purges on last week's show. And with his current drive to maintain party loyalty, there is always the question of Xi's authority and regime survivability. So to round out this topic, Miles, are the declining membership rates at all a concern for the CCP's future survivability?
No, you can interpret it differently as well. You might say, you know, the rigidity of recruitment process probably has increased. In other words, it's more selective. Doesn't necessarily mean that affected quality of the party members. In other words, by quality, I mean the degree to which they're loyal to the party, right? They're loyal to the communist cause. So 100 million is to a lot of people. Now, within 100 million people, remember, they have to constantly go through this ideological indoctrination. You know, as I said before, in the earlier episodes, there are about 2,700 colleges and universities in all of China. However, they're party indoctrination schools, we call it party schools, 党校. The number is more than the total of the Chinese colleges and universities. So, because at all levels, you have to go through sort of a periodical, what I call the ideological strengthening, and to raise your consciousness, and to basically study Marxism-Leninism from time to time. So they're all well trained. There is a gigantic party mechanism inside China. So if you recruit 100 million people, and then those people go through all kinds of disciplinary processes, and then you have some kind of constant self-purification process. So Chinese Communist Party has survived for more than 100 years since the founding by Vladimir Lenin in 1921 in Shanghai. There's a reason, because it's a well-disciplined, it's a fighting group. When the party gives an order, the whole machine would operate to finish that order and to fulfill that mission. This is one of the reasons why the United States is facing a very big challenger from China. It's not just a regularly sort of military strength and material strength. It's the way the Chinese Communist Party operates that really is very, very dangerous. And it has a perfect capability to conduct a covert operation because well disciplined, and to basically to conduct the United Front work to penetrate into the foreign entities, foreign companies, foreign government, and also subnational levels, state and local government. So it's very, very big. It's a well-disciplined. It has a lot of manpower and resources for the party center to utilize. So I think this membership is important, and most importantly, I think the party has capability to transform these new recruits into seasoned fighters, for the communist cause.
Moving to our next topic today, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with European Commission Vice President Kaja Kallas last week, during which time Minister Wang Yi made comments regarding the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine and that China could not afford for Russia to lose the war. The headline has caused quite the stir, as Chinese officials almost never speak so candidly, much less in closed-door meetings. So Miles, to start us off on this topic, what should we make of Minister Wang Yi's remarks in Brussels, and why might be the reason behind his candid disclosure?
Well, first of all, Wang Yi is a disgusting human being. This guy can say exactly opposite two things from both sides of his mouth, and he is a very he's a wolf warrior. He carries Xi Jinping's instructions to the letter. So what he has admitted to the EU officials in Brussels is nothing surprising, because people say, Wang Yi finally confessed to its own strategic calculus. That's definitely true. But also, it confirms what we already know, what China's intention was. What he said to the EU officials is this: you know what? China cannot afford a Russia defeat in Ukraine, because if Russia is defeated in Ukraine, the United States will be less distracted, so that it will have full attention to focus on China. And so this is basically what we've been saying on this program and in other sort of outlets all along. Now, the reason why this is very interesting, because it's laid out in the open. However, I don't think this is a kind of Wang Yi's slip of tongue. I think he's intentionally said this to create several false narratives. Number one, by saying so, he portrayed China as a victim of being cornered by the United States. That is, you know what? We're forced to take side on the Russian side, because if we don't do this, the United States is going to destroy the CCP. That is total nonsense. China sided with Russia because China has moral bankruptcy. It does not have the ideological as well as the material capability to really side with the victim, which is Ukraine. China professed to be a victim's friend, Ukraine's friend, and signed several strategic partnership deals. But none of them really would matter in the end, because Russia and China, they are both revanchist empires, and Russia and China share exactly the same logic of aggression. That is, if a country, independent sovereign country, share historical, ethno-linguistic links with Russia or China, therefore, those countries, independent and sovereign countries, should belong to Russia or China. So that is exactly Vladimir Putin's logic of aggression against Ukraine. That is precisely why China wants to take over Taiwan. So, and in several other places too, because all the other countries historically were supposed to be China's tributary states. In other words, they're not independent. They are protected by China. So this is kind of mentality of the imperial past. So that's why I think that China really is not cornered by anybody. So China is an aggressive country and is not on the defense, it's on the offense. So I think Wang Yi has another purpose, though, by saying this. That is, by portraying the United States as the ultimate force of destabilization, China wants to drive a wedge between Europe and the United States. Somehow, in Wang Yi's mindset, that Europe and and China are both victims of American hegemony, as he termed it. And this guy is absolutely sort of out of his mind. On the other hand, if you listen to him, he truly believes he's spreading the truth, because he lectured the EU officials for 4 hours. Mostly, it's supposed to be a dialogue, but he would go on a soliloquy and just listening to himself, talking about all this Chinese gobbledygook. So that's why I think he knows that the Wang Yi's remarks in Brussels should be taken seriously, but also it should not be taken as a surprise.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because also disclosed in the meeting, like you mentioned, were comments made about Beijing's growing concern that a Russian defeat would ultimately lead to Washington turning its full attention toward China and away from other theaters like the Middle East and Ukraine. Of course, this is underway already, as we've covered in the U.S. shift to the Indo-Pacific several times. And while China continues to assert that it is, quote, not a party to Russia's war and consistently advocates for peace talks, it's now clear that they see the conflict at least as a buffer to deter U.S. influence in near-regional capacities. So, Miles, let me ask, what do the foreign minister's remarks mean for the current geopolitical dynamic? And also, what could this reveal about the state of the CCP domestically?
We cannot really exaggerate the degree to which statements like this were ultimately self-defeating. And that's because, let's say Wang Yi is right. Let's just hypothetically say, you know what? Russia defeated will make the U.S. more focused on China, because China is the declared adversary of the United States. Now, let's say, what would a Russia victory in Ukraine look like? What would that mean? Well, that could mean one thing. That is one thing only. That is, if Russia prevails in Ukraine, United States and the European countries will be much, much more united to fight against a Russia-Chinese alliance. Though China will be more in a more of the target of a global anti-tyranny campaign. So, in other words, if Russia did win in Ukraine, China will be in much, much deeper trouble. So this is why the logic of this nonsense really would not go anywhere, will be detrimental to China. So Wang Yi thinks he's very smart. Ultimately, he's actually outsmarted by himself.
Moving to our final topic today, amidst the ongoing U.S. trade tariffs, China has faced domestic economic challenges from long before the current Trump administration took office. For several years now, there have been claims made about a consumer consumption crisis, declining luxury spending, high household savings, and mass exodus of foreign companies from China. While some of these trends do absolutely track, the nuanced reality reflects a more complex situation characterized by selective growth and certainly income disparities. So, Miles, can you help us unpack the consumer consumption myth here and how the current income disparity plays a role?
People go to China not necessarily for selling goods to the Chinese population. That is basically a myth, in my view. People, there are 1.4 billion people. If everybody buy one pair of shoes made in Seattle, and then Seattle will become super rich. That's not the case. Here's why. You mentioned about the income disparity. China's Gini coefficient is estimated around 0.7 or higher. That is a sharp urban-rural and regional divide. It's very, very serious. So let me put it this way. You mentioned about China's purchasing power. Let's just say this. China has 1.4 billion people. But people who are making $5 a day, less than $5 a day, constitute about 40% of the population, about 610 million people. That's about 40% of the entire working force. Another 26%, that is about 364 million Chinese people, are making under $10 a day. Now, people are making under $7 a day, consider about another 360 million people. So altogether, you add it up, over 95% of the entire 1.4 Chinese population are making under $7 a day. That is not a superpower with a super purchasing power. However, you do have this very powerful elite, which constitutes about 700 about 72 million people. Those were basically mostly party elites and the people with privileged background, the military, the police, and those people are making a lot of money. They are making a lot of money, about 5% of the Chinese population. So this is a country with the extreme income distribution. Now, you might say, well, in the United States, the same thing. You have very, very super rich over there. But the problem is the bottom line, the bottom portion of the United States population still make a lot of money, right? The average income is about $60,000. That's one of the highest in the world. So even though super rich, they're multi-billion dollars, but there's a huge middle class in America. In China, you don't have that. Keep in mind, 95% of the Chinese population make under $7 a day. That's why you cannot really sell a lot of stuff in China because people don't have money anymore. So that's why China is a superpower with super purchasing power is a myth. Now, most corporations go to China. They're not really trying to sell stuff to the Chinese population. Chinese market is pretty closed anyway. They go to there for cheap labor. So that's why you see Tesla, Apple, all those people were in China. They were exploiting the cheap labor. And that's the myth. So that's what I'm saying is that when China's premier Li Qiang goes around and says, China is the future of the world because we have 1.4 billion Chinese people who can buy a lot of stuff. Well, Chinese people are not buying anything. That's why you have a historic deflation in China. The prices are dropping. The prices are dropping because people don't have money to buy stuff, or they have money they don't want to buy because they don't see the future of China's economic growth. That's the reason why. And also, I think if you have money in China, the first thing you want to do is to get your money out of China. China is a country with one of the most serious currency control. So the capital flight in China is big business. So the party try to control it, but the more you try to control it, the more people are becoming creative in getting money out of China. So the bottom line is most Chinese people do not have confidence in the Chinese economic revival. And so should be the rest of the world. So should the rest of the world.
The CCP has attempted to address current issues related to consumer spending, including increased pension payouts and subsidies on medical insurance. However, these have been hindered by provincial and local level government debt, limited fiscal capacities to fund increases in disposable income. As a result, a lot of the private Chinese businesses now are looking to boost wages and increase job openings, but have clearly faltered when faced with the high youth unemployment rates and declining consumer confidence, like you mentioned. So even then, it all comes back to the party. And I guess to round out the topic for today, Miles, why exactly is the CCP so sensitive about consumer spending power? And do you think they will be able to resolve the current issues here?
It's very, very difficult to resolve the issue because the scale is massive. You got a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, for example, if you change a little bit by the local government of your medical insurance amount or medical insurance stipend, and then that could stimulate a huge mass protest, which has happened a couple of years ago in cities like Wuhan, Shanghai, and other places. So the party is really sensitive to this because domestic consumption can lead to region crisis. And the middle class is not spending money. Party's common prosperity has destroyed entrepreneurial spirit, and the people with the money, the private, non-state sectors, they're trying to get out of China anyway. So the lack of consumer spending really exposes the weakness of the party. It's the economic system. It's undermines confidence in the party's economic achievement and fuel social discontent. That's what party care about.
Well, that's unfortunately all the time we have for this week. But before we go, a quick announcement for our listeners. In addition to our weekly China Insider podcast episode this week, we will also be releasing the latest Insider interview episode this Wednesday, July 9th, with Tori Bruno, CEO of United Launch Alliance. Be sure to check that out, as well as Miles' interview last week with Joe Gabia Sr., CEO of State Shield, in case you haven't listened to that already. So with that, Miles, as always, thank you again for lending us your expertise on these critical issues. Looking forward to speaking with you again next week.
Okay, Colin, as always, a pleasure.